Cyber risk and compliance automation is finally here. Legacy GRC systems cannot support the powerful, real-time automation and oversight that organizations require to take risks that matter to succeed. CyberSync continuous control automation ingests data from the IT GRC stack to update controls against regulatory requirements and risks in real time, delivering insights and visibility. See how members of the Fortune 500 are saving millions annually by visiting securityweekly.com/cybersync. Monitoring and maintaining compliance is a never-ending struggle with a high price of failure. Firemon helps customers meet complex and varying compliance requirements. Firemon has fully customizable reporting, analytics, assessments, and dashboards to meet the compliance needs of any organization. With Firemon, compliance reports take a tenth of the time, and real-time continuous compliance eliminates the anxiety and headaches of audit preparation. Improve security outcomes by improving security operations with Firemon. Visit securityweekly.com/Firemon to learn more. People require access from anywhere to resources everywhere, but legacy security is ill-equipped for today's hybrid organization. Appgate SDP delivers zero-trust network access for hybrid workforces and workloads, empowering trusted users with secure, frictionless connections to only what they need. Make your attack surface invisible and reduce time to provision by 91% with Appgate SDP, a leader in the 2021 Forrester ZTNA New Wave. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Appgate.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Jason Albuquerque and Ben Carr. We have a few webcasts coming up soon. First, join us February 16th to learn about validation techniques within applications. Then join us March 2nd to learn 5 things you can do to catch more bad guys. And finally, join us March 10th for an intro to KQL queries. To register for these webcasts, please visit securityweekly.com/webcasts. And don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings at securityweekly.com/on-demand. CRA's Business Intelligence Unit has launched its next survey on Zero Trust. What are your barriers to Zero Trust implementation? Take our survey and enter to win a $500 Tango card by visiting securityweekly.com/Zero Trust. Report results will be released at our upcoming Zero Trust eSummit in March and will be presented by yours truly. I'm doing all the research reports and updates for the eSummits this year. All right, gentlemen, articles. So Jason, I thought of you, this first article. I'm like, Jason's going to love this article.
You know, it absolutely amazes me. And I love when you bring these articles in because it's just a reminder of what an influence, you know, my military upbringing has had on my leadership skills. Right. And I mean, at the end of the day, all in, I spent, 8 years in the Marine Corps, combination active and some reserve time. But that amount of time had such a crazy influence on my career, and I just, this article reminded me of that, and the only thing I would do is maybe change the order of some things. I would, me, I love the order of operations of sometimes when the authors of the articles list out things you can be doing. And I would have put number 5 at the top.
Always got to tweak it.
Yep.
Yeah. I put number 5 at the top because here's the thing, right? Number 5 was Marshall believed in leading by example and setting the right tone for his team. So this was all about General Marshall, the article itself. And, one of the comments that he had, and you guys hear me say this all the time, right? Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and it's the ability to influence. And look at the comment, right? I think leadership is the ability to influence people. The most effective way that I can influence people is by setting a tone and an example. That's all about trust, and that's how you build strong relationships, is that right there. You lead by example, you gain trust, and then you can have good conversation and influence. Top, that's tops for me right there. And then, go ahead, Ben.
No, I was just say I don't disagree with Jason. One of the things that really stood out from this for me was, he was smart enough to know his own limitations and where he needed somebody who had a different set of skills than he did. And I think that's one thing I see in a lot of leaders, and I think we've probably all been guilty of itself. So our point is, the fear that if you bring somebody else in who knows something else, that they'll supplant you or upstage you, when in reality, it's always good to bring in somebody who has a different set of skills and can bring something else to the table, and it just makes the whole team stronger. So I think that's something all leaders need to really focus on.
Yeah,
and I love that.
No, agreed. Agreed. It's a scenario where the best leaders become servant leaders, right? And ultimately, those top leaders are bringing in the best of the best around them. You've heard me say it. It's the conductor syndrome, right? Mm-hmm. I may not be the master of playing the cello or the oboe or whatever instrument, but at the end of the day, I want to be that conductor that brings all of these great talents together and makes beautiful music. That's top leadership right there. And knowing when to bring folks together and when to bring those strengths together, even if it's not going to benefit you. Because part of the story, in the beginning was, he had the opportunity to be the leader of the invasion at Normandy, right? But had the insight to know that his presence was needed in Washington. And actually, that would have been, when you talk about, military leaders in their medals of honor, I mean, that's like top notch. Battlefield command is like top notch for a military leader. He gave that up because he knew that he was needed in Washington, and to be able to do something like that just shows the level of leadership that he was commanding.
Yeah, and he did empower his leaders. This is the my part of this, right? I agree with you. Number 5 should be number 1 because it's all about trust. But then you believe in your people to actually do their jobs, right? You can't micromanage them. Exactly right.
Some of the leaders that I've seen who cannot get out of their own way and actually become sustainable leaders are the ones who cannot get their fingers out of the weeds, right? Where they feel obligated to be in the weeds on the daily. They can never get out of their own way, and they'll never be sustainable. They'll never grow organizations and grow leadership teams and build the environment that's set up to grow successfully. Because when your fingers are in the weeds on the daily, you're not doing the job of the leader, being strategic and looking down what the future of the organization is and building out that strategy for the future. You're constantly in the run. You're constantly in the keep the lights on, and it's not sustainable.
Yeah. So article number 2, it's a book. It's an article about a book, but it's an interesting premise that in reality, nobody really cares about security. So as a CISO, like how do you influence that? How do you change that? And he talks about 3 key areas here that CISOs need to be able to do to help make security a priority for others. He talks about education. He talks about himself, right? Like his personal stuff. And then he said, well, the last way is to have an incident, which I don't think is the preferred option for most organizations.
Yeah, I mean,
if you've been in this,
this is a tough one for me, Ben. I don't know about you, but this is a tough one for me.
Well, I was gonna say, if you've been in the seat for a while, and I'm sure you've seen this happen, Jason, and Matt, you've probably heard it too. Is like, it's amazing how many people say if we could only have an incident, it would change things, right? And yeah, it changes things. That's for sure, and sometimes in a positive way, and sometimes in a negative way. But I do struggle with this one because it's a truism. I don't think people do care in general, but I think I get back to what we've talked about a lot on this show is they don't care because we're not making it relevant, right? We're not talking in a way that they can conceptualize and understand it. And the technology, they certainly don't care. They're just expecting us to handle that. But it's how do you translate that back into business that then actually, I think, becomes impactful for other areas of the organization and other leaders. And back to that first article, it's about figuring out how to really be the leader and be the strategic person, and maybe letting go of some of the things that you like to do and figuring out how to better address the things that you need to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Ben. I think what this, and I haven't read the book, so it's one of those things I got to leave that out there. Maybe there's a better explanation in the book, but the article I had trouble with because I read through this and I say these are self-inflicted wounds. We've done this to ourselves. If the organization and the leaders in the organization don't care about cybersecurity, it's because we haven't done our jobs in educating them as to the why, right? And there are 3 ways, and I saw 3 ways to make security a priority: education, ego, right? I took ego out of that, and incident. I think there's more to that, right? I think there's a lot more to that. I think number 1, being able to articulate the needs of our customers, right? And their compliance needs for us as a third party, legal pressures, cyber insurance, basically the needs of being able to obtain or keep cyber liability insurance. We need to be addressing all of these risks that are out there and having the conversations and educating folks. So I think a lot of this is self-inflicted. And I think that's what kind of just, raises a hair on the back of my neck a little bit, because it's self-inflicted wounds in many instances.
Yeah. So this next article is interesting because it's an interview with Debbie Wheeler, who's the CISO over at Delta. And there's good content in here, but the opening line is a little interesting, as you shouldn't view security as a competitive advantage. And I was
you know what? It's I'll say this. It's altruistic, but I don't think it's reality.
Yeah. I bought off on
right?
I bought off on the concept of why she was saying it.
Yeah.
But the reality is right now, it's definitely a competitive advantage. I mean, a competitive advantage 100%. Is anything where you're differentiating yourself from your competitors. And
it's anything. It's not just security. It's the technology you use. It's the processes you have. It's the cybersecurity best practices you're implementing. It's all of the above. Anything is game in business to make that competitive advantage, including cybersecurity. And to be honest with you, in the environment and world we're in right now, that's probably going to start happening, or is happening now, more often, because it's something that can be positioned as, a differentiator for a business. And yes, it is 100% altruistic. It is one of those things where if we had Nirvana tomorrow, absolutely sure, we should all be sharing information with each other and not even being worried about competitive advantage. But that's not the business world today, unfortunately.
Yeah. And she does talk about some really good challenges around balancing security requirements with business needs and customer interfaces and other things, right? There's some great examples because, again, it's a business and it's a risk discussion like we were talking about in the previous segment, right? It is a risk discussion at the end of the day. And she brings up some very good points that, every business and risk decision has to balance security in here. But I do believe that I agree with you, Jason, that today I think it is a competitive advantage for certain organizations.
Listen, at the end of the day, go through the exercise of grabbing every single competitive advantage you have against your competitor. So Delta, she works for Delta, right? Across the entire business, bucket every single competitive advantage they have. Now, they're going to go share that with American Airlines or Southwest, including security, but everything else as well, right? So no, they're of course not. I think the CEO would probably go off their rocker because they don't want to be sharing the competitive advantages that they have with their competition. They need to, be out there killing it as a business. So security just falls in line with all of the different competitive advantages that they have in their tool chest.
Yeah, I think the question is more why is it still a competitive advantage? Like, why haven't we normalized
Sure.
this?
Yeah, it's a great question. Why aren't we doing more?
Look at the environment we're in. Of course, it's a competitive advantage right now. We're still not winning.
Right. That's true.
If we were all winning the game, or at least have high scores in the game, it wouldn't be a topic. And to be honest with you, many of us probably wouldn't be employed. So
yeah, it's true. So I'm doing the ransomware, my presentation from the ransomware research because I'm doing the session next week as part of the eSummit. 43% of the respondents had a ransomware attack in the last 2 years. 58% of them paid the fine. Why? To get their business back online. Like
they had
the
to.
Reason, right? Because they have to. Back to this point. If you are doing a good job at protecting your organization from ransomware, it is a competitive advantage for you because 58% of your competitors potentially are paying the fines to stay in business.
For it. That's right. 100%. So, we won't be having this conversation when we're all winning the game, but we're not winning the game right now.
Absolutely. So cybersecurity incident response, the 6 steps to success. There's a lot more than 6 steps in here. If you look at the graphic from SANS Institute, 6 steps. 6 steps times like 15 for each step. There's like 90 steps in here.
They should have said 6 domains.
Right.
That's what they should have said.
Yeah, just do it all.
I started reading this article. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not 6 steps. This is like,
right. You know what though? The first thing I looked at and I kind of, I went through all of these 6 steps, and the first thing I said to myself is, we're kind of good in the middle. But when you get to the ends, the preparation, the recovery, and the lessons learned, that's where we're really sucking as organizations as a whole, right? Identify, contain,
and more
eradicate.
We're not good at the front end.
Right. That's it.
Yeah.
Put the effort into the front end.
That's right. That's right. And that, that life cycle side of the aisle too, right? That feedback loop, that's the lessons learned, because that feedback loop feeds your preparation for the next time you're preparing, So that's why I'm saying at the the bookends, we suck. We're not preparing, and we're not learning lessons and sharing them back into the pipeline so we can be well prepared.
Right. And if we go back to the previous article, those lessons you learned should be shared across the industry so everybody can be better prepared.
Right.
We talked about this a couple of weeks ago about crisis management and all the preparation stuff that organizations need to do, and we're not doing it. But
let's get better on the bookends.
Yeah, and it's not 6 steps, everybody. Just so you know, there's a lot in there. There's a lot in there. I thought this was a great article. 6 ways how to say no. Right, 6 tips to actually how to say no. And I think this is good because I know for a fact you guys have to say no at times, right?
I was going to say, do CISOs really need to learn how to say no? Like, isn't that the image we now have?
We're trying to get the brand of saying yes more, damn it.
We want to get to yes, not get to no.
You just say later and offer an alternative and you're good.
Right. It's one of those scenarios where what Ben just said is absolutely true, because we've said no so much over the course of our careers as security professionals that, in leadership positions, we're trying to get to the yes more, right? We don't want to be the department of no, but in many instances we have to, and we learn techniques. We've talked about it before where, let's talk about the outcomes you're trying to achieve. Maybe you're coming at me in a perspective of, I want this, I want X, but maybe it's really not X that you want. Or maybe this road that you're saying to get to X isn't the road we need to take to get there. So let's figure out how we get to outcomes. And in other instances, we're going to have to say no, right? And there's so many different reasons. I mean, we're being pulled in a million different directions. So maybe it's our bandwidth that doesn't allow us to do something. But being open and honest about it isn't an issue. If there isn't bandwidth and you're speaking to another leader and say, listen, this is, right now, based on my priorities, I'm not going to be able to get to this for another 8 weeks. If anything, that's going to be able to maybe get support upstream for you to be able to hire, bring in bandwidth, bring in support, something like that. So, it's not just the definitive no and walk away. Give the why. Give the reason. Help with an outcome, right?
Yeah, and I thought tip number 7 was interesting to your ask about the outcomes. Like, what are they trying to achieve? Ask versus guess, right? Yep. On what are you trying to do? So then you can actually have a relevant conversation about it. Maybe it is later. Maybe it is no. Maybe it is, yeah, sure, we could do that now, right? Yep. But if you're not asking the right questions about what are you trying to achieve, how do you know how to answer the questions they're asking you correctly, right?
Exactly. And if you're not offering an explanation as to why you're disagreeing or saying no, you're basically just leaving someone hanging, saying, you know what, they just don't want to help me. And that's not how you want to have a relationship. So it's no, because it's, we can't go this route because, and offer an explanation. And once you offer that explanation, and it's a legitimate, explanation as to the why, typically you can start working with folks on maybe a different outcome or a different approach. So it's not always a definitive no. You got to get to that deeper layer.
Yeah. Last article. I thought this was a really good article as well, because I think a lot of organizations are struggling with, what does go back to work mean? Like, what what kind of environment are we going to be in? We're going to say 100% remote. We're going 100% in person. We're doing hybrid. What are the trade-offs? What are the pros and cons of all these different approaches? And this HBR Harvard Business Review article kind of walks through some of the challenges and trade-offs that organizations are going to have to make as they go back in. They're conversations we're having, right? Yep. Somebody brought up on the leadership call the other day, like, are we keeping the New York headquarters? Because literally there's nobody in it. I think somebody goes in like once a week, but you're paying for New York real estate and nobody's in the office. Are you literally going to keep it or not? And we're all on Zoom calls all the time, or Teams calls for us.
Yeah, just FYI, the person going in is the person emptying the trash cans that aren't filled. So I'm not sure why we still do that, but it's really strange.
Yeah, it's a struggle that so many organizations that I work with, talk to, are having, right? And it always comes down to, we could shed all of our real estate, but how do we continue to foster creativity and collaboration? Mm-hmm. Individual productivity is through the roof, because you don't get what I used to call the drive-by from being in the office, where, I'm heads down, I'm in the middle of something, all of a sudden it's knock, knock, knock. I need your help. And it pulls you away, right? It pulls you out of your focus. And you don't get those drive-bys. But that's a blessing and a curse, because so many times those drive-bys would turn into innovative, creative conversations or problem-solving activities where you'd fix something on the fly and be like, holy shit, that's absolutely amazing. And it wasn't something scheduled. Right? It wasn't something that you had on the books, and it created that collaborative and creative environment where you could innovate on the fly. And that's so hard to do on a Zoom call. It's so hard to do remotely.
Yeah.
So it's conversations around what's that hybrid approach, because so many people love the individual productivity side of it because we get stuff done.
So I don't think we've figured it out yet, but I'm interested in the opinion from both of you. I read an interesting article the other day about Microsoft trying to come out with more of a VR Teams environment, right? Using HoloLens or potentially an Oculus. And I think that there's some practicality there. Like, the only thing that stands in the way from my perspective is $3,500 for a HoloLens. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be buying those very quickly.
It definitely needs to become more affordable, Ben. But I'll tell you right now, I've actually been part of that. I've been part of Microsoft's ecosystem where we had a virtual conference in that ecosystem.
Yeah. And it seems like
it was pretty damn cool. I'm going to be honest with you. It really was. Your ability to virtually, control the room and add things to the room. It's like having your own virtual whiteboard in front of everybody.
Yeah, it's the whiteboard for me that's missing. I've been trying to figure out how to do the whiteboard in this world, and it hasn't worked yet.
Yeah, it is super cool. It definitely has a future. There's no doubt about it. I think it can help, but again, I don't know if it's going to be a replacement from you and I sitting side by side, or offices next to each other, where all of a sudden we just have that organic, creative, innovative conversation. I don't know if that's a replacement.
I agree with you. I think that I struggle the same thing that you do, Ben. The whiteboard, the missing whiteboard, like the ability to just jot things down and write and draw. And I still use paper. I'm old school. My wife does not understand why I still walk around with a composition notebook, but I do.
It's the memory loss. It's the memory loss. That's why you do that.
It's not that as much as I hate typing, because I'm a horrible typer, because I took music instead of typing, and now in my entire career I'm on the computer side. So I write, and I like to write because I like to draw circles around things. I like to highlight, underline things. Like, I can't replicate
it's the pictures.
that.
It's the visual representation. Like my early career was a sales engineer, right? And I was always on a whiteboard, and I missed that interaction with a group of people. And be like, here, take the expo marker. They don't smell great, but take it and write on the board, and let's see if we can figure this out together, as opposed to trying to do it over email. This is not functional.
It isn't, right? So I think the struggle is how do we get that balance? The balance of allowing folks to be home and have that individual productivity, but create an environment and a culture where you get together and you convene and you brainstorm and you do the creative side and the innovative side.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I'm seeing from some of my advisory clients here in Colorado, they're basically full remote with flex space. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like the optimal, I think, right now is
Yep.
And there's advantage. I was talking to Jay Prassel from Automox, CEO of Automox, because he said the beauty about being full remote is I can hire talent anywhere in the country now, right?
Yeah,
they don't
100%.
have to be in Boulder, right?
Yep.
Which is great. But what you miss is people getting together. So what they've done is, I think, really interesting because they're starting to get concentrations. So their CMO, I think, is in Tennessee or something like that. So he's hiring people in Tennessee. So like the marketing team is kind of close. So then you can use a flex space and get the marketing team together without getting the whole company together or having, flying people to a headquarters or whatever. I think CyberGRX is doing something similar, pretty much full remote, using flex space to really be able to bring people in to certain locations and sit down and have some meetings as a small group so they can get that collaborative creativity, which is what I think is the challenge for a lot of organizations in full remote. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other side for us, because, obviously being in technology consulting is a place to meet with customers and have business meetings with them, right? Where we can have executive briefing center type meetings and sit down with them for 3 or 4 hours and just understand their business better. Bring in C-level executives and use the whiteboard, right? Talk about, the struggles that they're having, the business initiatives that are failing and how we can help. So yeah, having that place to convene, whether it's your employees or with your customers or whatever the case may be, it is super important. And I think that's it, right? It's either maybe owning your own flex space that you can use or, going out and just doing the lease, right? And just leasing space for the time you need.
Or getting physical events back in place so we can all go hang out at RSA conference, Black Hat, InfoSec World. I mean, come on, can we get back to physical events already?
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I agree with that big time.
So needed.
Yep. It gives us a place to go. Everybody's ready. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. And we'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.